Hi, and thank you for joining us today. As you can see, the intro on this video is a little different. I've got a funny story behind that. I spent a lot of time working on Tree of Life for our AZURE project, only to discover once the battery died that the camera had not recorded any of the construction on this block. And I considered recreating the block so we could have the footage. But after some careful thought, I've decided to skip that. I'm going to edit the video that I do have, which is the end section of the construction of this block. I think there's still some good information that we can gain from this. And frankly, I'm not sure I want to go through and make this block again. Sometimes that's the problem that you have with recording videos and not having a mechanism in place to check as you go. But being a small channel without a staff, sometimes that happens. So here is the video that was captured from this construction of the block number 90, Tree of Life. It was a fun block together, but it did have lots of small pieces. I hope you enjoy what I've been able to salvage from this, and we'll pick up in 2 weeks with a new block. Thanks so much for your understanding, and as always, we're glad that you're here with us at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi, and welcome back. Our camera died, but in the meantime, I was able to get some of the paper out where the seams come together, and I pressed it. So this is what we have so far, and we can see the trunk of our tree, and then the branches, and the center, almost that crown of the top of the tree. Take those basting stitches out. Okay, so now the only thing left on this is just to add the border, and I'm going to simply add this side on and then the other two. They're going to be straight seams, so there's not going to be anything tricky about it, I don't think. And it's just going to be a matter of sewing them on, and if we get them pinned on properly, we should do okay. And I was going to say that you probably could wing it as far as doing this, but we're trying to be pretty precise with these so that our stitch lines are even and straight. So I'm not going to do that, but if you are inclined to do that, it's your project. Do what you want. Okay. It would be handy to have a iron a little closer and more readily available when you need it so that you could quickly get those done. But I also like to use a very hot iron on this because we're dealing with so much paper, and my little iron I just don't feel gets hot enough. Okay, so we've got that sewn on that one end, and I'm just trying to get a little bit of the paper out so our seams on the corner will lie flat. Okay, a little bit of paper here on this corner. When it's working well, it's working well, and when it's not, it's not. Okay, so we're going to kind of do a little bit of finger pressing, and then we're going to sew the other ends on. Same technique. And I'm going to go ahead while I'm here and pin both sides on. Wow, that lined up beautifully. Now I do notice that my pieced unit, can you see that? The pieced unit is a little bit longer than my border piece. And what I'm going to do to make that work is I'm going to go ahead and take some more of this paper out. Well, you know, I don't know that that's going to work. What I think I'll do is come in here and clip between, clip the paper, but leave in stitches. Does that make sense? So I'm only clipping the paper, but I'm clipping through that basting stitch. And that's going to give us a little bit of room to ease that in. Please be super careful that you're only clipping paper though. Okay, so now we can ease that a little bit better. All right, let's pin the other side while we're here. Oh, right on the money. I see the same thing here as well. This one's a little bit longer too. And when those pieces slip off of the seam line when they're sewing, you're going to have that. I'm just going to put a really big one there for right now. And we're going to start sewing and see how this works. And I'm going to sew this with the paper on top. Just try to ease it in. You might have seen me making a face because that was much faster than I would have liked. But I was kind of in the middle of it and hesitant to stop it. Okay, let's try the other side. We'll try not to go quite so fast. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to clip a couple of little places. And again, be really sure you're just cutting paper. Because if it's me and I cut this after doing all this piecing, I probably would cry. Now, I'll tell you, this one is a little bit more of a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust that so that the pieced part extends about 1/16 of an inch beyond the cut piece. So this is a little bit longer on the bottom than the top. And we're going to sew and see what happens. Okay, I'll be honest with you, that one I kind of struggled through a bit because as we You could tell the areas where the seam had gotten a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, because the line, instead of being straight, kind of had a little curve to it. And what I did was I put my seam, I sewed my seam between where it was and where it should have been. So I kind of cut the difference in half, and let's see how that worked. Well, it looks pretty nice, and just looking at it, it looks pretty square. So I'm going to take a little bit of that paper out and give it a little press, and we'll be back and we'll check the size with our template and see how we did. Well, I haven't gotten all of my paper out of this block, but I did get it pressed, so we should have a pretty good idea of how things are looking. And my work area here is a little messy, but here's our block that we have. This is Tree of Life. I think in our little drawing it looks like that. And oops, I didn't press that one right. I'm glad we caught that. So that'll be a little more like that. Okay, let's see how close we got to the 6.5. We are pretty darn close. I think once we correct this, and that's won't lay down because of the paper. Okay, there we are. We're at 6.5. Within less than 1/16 of an inch of being there. That is pretty good. So this has been a bit of a challenging block, and I will say this: if you were to sit down and cut a 6.5 inch block out of a single piece of fabric, I can almost guarantee you that if you are cautious and take your time, you'll be able to create a perfect square. Every seam that you add into that block gives the opportunity for that block to change either in shape or size. And a lot of times when we're adding seams, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So to have a block that we can have this many pieces in and still come out as close as we did to 6.5 inches, I think that's really great. And when we take the rest of this paper out, because there's still a good bit of paper in here, I think it'll get even bigger. It may come out to 6.5 on the button. Now, we did have a little bit of challenges with the pieces matching up. Those lines that had lots of pieces sewn together were a little bit longer than the ones that were a single piece. And that's kind of what I'm talking about in a nutshell. So be mindful of that and realize that anytime you're adding a seam, you do have the opportunity for it to be just a little bit off. But it is a beautiful block. In some ways, I kind of wish we had done the border in a solid white, and that would have really made this tree stand out. If I do it again for some reason, I will keep that in mind, because I think it would have been even more impressive with that white border on the outside. Nevertheless, it's done, and that's the way it's going to stay. So I hope you enjoyed this with our block 90 Tree of Life. I'll hold it up this way and then off to the angle. So on point and our regular square setting. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next week, or at the Shamrock. Well, we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and we'll be working back on AZURE in 2 weeks.